Coping with COVID-19, brought to you by NGC, at the forefront of energy.
Welcome back. And the headlines have been screaming about the fact that COVID-19 has been affecting gas and industry. And we've seen where airlines have been grounded, affecting oil prices for the first time, where it was less than zero yesterday. The Dow Jones slipping down to less than 600 points, and unprecedented times here with regard to business. Well, to tell us more about it, we have Dr. Keith Nurse back with us on the line, and he is the principal and president of the Sir Arthur Lewis College. Good morning, Dr. Nurse.
Good morning to you.
All right, so Dr. Nurse, we're going to jump right in. We saw yesterday unprecedented, the crude dropping to below zero, which I can't even think of a time when it was even that, and resulting in the Dow Jones slipping as well as oil prices slipping. What do we make of all of this?
Well, it's all related to the global pandemic, which is that due to the lockdown, the closure of borders and so on, the demand for fuel
Yes.
Has declined dramatically. That means planes aren't flying, cruise ships aren't using fuel, automotive vehicles are not utilizing as traditional levels of fuel.
Mm-hmm.
And so the demand has dropped dramatically in the last 2 weeks. And that's really kicking in now. It's also a number of other factors. The glut in the market as a result of the pricing war almost between Russia and Saudi Arabia. And it really has to do with a number of geopolitical factors as well as market factors. The price will rebound, maybe not to what we'd like, but it's in nobody's interest for oil prices to be as low as they are.
Yeah, and so how does that, we're talking about you mentioned about the slowdown with regard to movement. Yesterday as well, we saw where airlines like Virgin Australia and Virgin Atlantic being threatened. And that is an airline that actually comes into the Caribbean, not just Trinidad and Tobago, but the entire region. And we're seeing where other airlines are bailed out. But what is the ripple effect of all of this for Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, for the region as a whole, the problem is going to be airlift. And so when economies do open back up, who are going to be the survivors? And several airlines in the United States have been bailed out. The Europeans are also considering some bailouts for their airlines. But yeah, we are going to see a number of firms disappear as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and crisis. In fact, we are really at depressionary levels right now. And so it's gone beyond the terms of a recession in the classic sense.
Yes.
The dips are, and the global economy are estimated for this year to be somewhere between about 13% and almost 30%. So we are really on the cusp of a global depression in effect. And so you see a lot of casualties, firms and sectors being significantly affected.
But we've been speaking about diversification for some time now. How easy, as an alternative, and I guess with regard to slipping into a depression, how difficult or how easy it is to diversify?
Well, the question is, do you have an alternative? In many respects, when you have a crisis of the sort that we are faced with here in Trinidad and Tobago and elsewhere in the region, remember, the point is this: the Caribbean is very much linked in or integrated into the global economy. And because we have such high trade to GDP ratios, it means then once there's a shock in the global economy, it generates what we call a demand shock for our economies. And so there's not enough demand for what we offer. And so in many Caribbean countries, there's no tourism taking place. That accounts for 40, 30, 50% of their GDP. It means there's very little activity. In the case of Trinidad and Tobago, similarly, we are dependent on we used to call it monocrop when we used to talk about sugar and bananas and so on. But really, what we have are economies that stand on one or two legs, and so they're severely affected once there's a demand shock in the global economy. So diversification has always been an imperative. If you go back and read the Moyne report, which was as a result of the crisis and the protests back in the 1930s, that recommendation was made. These economies need to diversify. So the question that arises now for Trinidad and Tobago is how fast can we propel this process? We've been talking about it for a long time.
Yeah.
We've made some strides here and there, but really, fundamentally, we're still stuck as a hydrocarbon-based economy, and that won't suffice going forward.
So the UN Day for Creativity and Innovation was yesterday, and there is reference to innovation in Vision 2030 document with all the pillars of development, the development strategy in the Vision 2030 document. How close are we, and what needs to be done with regard to innovation and entrepreneurship here in Trinidad and Tobago?
Yeah, it's really incredible, you know. I mean, I've participated in so many of these diversification efforts in Trinidad and Tobago, whether you're talking about Vision 2020, then I was on the Economic Development Advisory Board. The big problem in the case of Trinidad and Tobago has always been implementation. We have no shortage of plans. What we have is a limited capacity in terms of our governance structures to implement these ideas. And so even in the current arrangement with the task force and so on that the government has put together and the Prime Minister is chairing and leading, the issue then becomes, so how are we going to embed this into the economy? How are we going to take advantage of the emerging opportunities and minimize the threats or challenges to the economy? And that becomes the key criteria by which we generate a new framework for organizing the economy. It's really a governance issue. You know, it's not about technology. It's not about the people, because we have the people. Trinidad and Tobago is blessed with a fairly large middle class, a business class, and a diaspora that we could tap into that has a lot of technology and capabilities and investment opportunities. What we need is a driver for this process.
Yeah, but I want to challenge you a bit on that, because we speak about VABs, values, attitudes, and behaviors, with regard to people, the cultural aspects. And in some of the other countries to which Trinidad and Tobago is compared, you see a different values, attitudes, and behaviors. So we have the positives, but we also have attitudes and behaviors that do not necessarily support innovation and creativity. We're seeing more of that now, given what people are forced to do during the COVID-19. But let's go back to primary school, secondary school, university, where you are taught, and you're taught to regurgitate and not necessarily to innovate. So it's persons who are outside of the box usually who really foster that whole level of innovation. Do you think that we need to do more work with the values, attitudes, and behaviors of our people as well, in addition to pushing from a driver from the top?
I couldn't agree more. At the college where I'm principal and president, our new tagline is sustainability, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Why? This is where the world is going. The global economy requires all of us to change the way we operate because of climate change and other crises that are upon us. However, Trinidad and Tobago suffers from a resource curse. So Trinidad, like many other petro states, are so fixed and tied into hydrocarbons, they are unable to diversify out of it. Yeah. And so this lock-in mentality is what drives our culture. In part, it's also that we are former colonies. And so in former colonies, there's a tendency not to have the cultural confidence to invest in your own capabilities. You're always thinking, well, there's something out there from another country that we can draw on, particularly our former colonizers, to drive our agenda. And in this current context, you could see that it's everyone for themselves in many respects. And so the big countries, the rich countries, are going to bail out their firms, their taxpayers, and so on. They're going to bail out and help some of the really poor developing countries, what we call the least developed countries. But those countries in the middle, the middle income countries, really have to figure out their own strategy for dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic and its consequences.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that, you know, when we're talking about organization and saying that persons are at the forefront of their organization, especially the frontline persons, they're the ones who are the link who can drive innovation really, because they're dealing with the customer, right? They're the ones who are interfacing and can take that information back into the organization once the culture exists to encourage innovation in the organization. But if we were to open that up to the wider community now, what are some of the little anecdotes that, or you know, little tidbits that you would probably suggest that we can do to drive innovation in the entire society?
Yeah, we've tried the top-down approach, which hasn't worked really well, which is that a government-led process has its limitations. Our governmental structures have a high level of inertia. Trinidad and Tobago is actually quite notorious, even among the international development agencies, for not being able to utilize loan funds or even grant funds and having to give the money back. Part of it has to do, again, with our oil and resource curse, but it's also that we don't have this capacity to keep transforming or reinventing the economy. So really, if you look at the current scenario, Trinidad and Tobago has really three options. Status quo management. We could go back to where we were. That's highly unlikely because the global economy would have moved. And so if we don't change our modalities, what will happen is a reversal. So that's option number 2. But option number 3 is reinvention. How do we reinvent the economy? And I'm suggesting that what we need is innovation from below, where we encourage a greater participation. In fact, a democratization of the innovation process, whereby we encourage ordinary citizens, those who have the capacity and the resources, as well as the ideas, to come together and build a new economy. This is not pie in the sky. Several countries around the world are utilizing these methodologies as opposed to the traditional way, where you organize a group of select people at the top to figure out what's to do with the economy. Those days are done. We have a lot of young people who have an understanding of the new technologies in ways that those of us who are a little bit dated, like myself, don't. And so what we need to do is
I think intergenerational is important, though. I think intergenerational is important. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm agreeing, of course. I'm not saying that people like myself don't have any value.
Yeah.
What I'm saying, though, is that traditionally we have focused only on people of a certain age to drive the process.
Yes.
A top-down approach.
Yes.
And what I'm suggesting is that we need a bottom-up as well, so that you percolate innovation and you change the culture of the society. And so that our schools and our workplaces encourage innovation. But if you look at the level of research and development investment in Trinidad and Tobago, it has historically been 1/4%. Now, what's recommended for developing countries to progress is something close to 2%. So you're talking about a massive rise in research and development.
Yeah.
And most of this research and development happens in the government sector and not in the private sector.
Yes.
And so our private sector is very much risk averse. It doesn't invest in innovation in the way in which we would want them to.
Yeah,
and so these are the key transformations that we're talking about.
I can't agree with you more, because we do need research-driven decision-making, which is one of the things that we need to develop more here in Trinidad and Tobago. We're going to stick a pin in it there, because I know we're going to be back next week. Dr. Keith Nurse, thank you so much for joining us. Then, of course, senior economists all over the world, really, providing information and consultancy throughout the world at various agencies, but of course now the principal and president of the Sir Arthur Lewis College. And that has been our segment with Coping with COVID.
Coping with COVID-19, brought to you by NGC, at the forefront of energy.